This is a lesson on my favorite movable major and minor scale patterns on the classical guitar. So this comes from my new technique book, and there's a link for that under the video, but feel free to just watch the video and grab the fingerings for free. Remember to always use your ear, so I think between the video and your ear you should be able to pick up most of it, but if you like to pick up the book, feel free to do so. So movable major scale patterns, those are patterns that once played, or once you know the finger pattern, you can move them to other areas of the guitar. So if I play it here, it's an A major scale. If I play it here, it's an A sharp major scale. If I play it here, it's a B major scale, etc., etc. So they're movable. You learn one scale pattern, and then you know 12 scales. So we're going to go over mainly 2 and 3 octave scale patterns, and these are just my favorite patterns. There's a lot of them out there, but these are my favorite ones, and these are the ones I use most often, mainly for technique purposes. Before I dive into all the exercises in the book, just remember that I have 2 other videos you should watch. One of them is how to practice scales. It'll go over lots of different ways to practice scales to make you better. And the second video is 1 octave movable scales. If you practice your 1 octave movable scales, you'll notice the patterns when we practice these 2 and 3 octave scales. So we're about to practice these 2 and 3 octave scales. Go over the 1 octave ones so that you recognize the shapes within these major scales. So let's get on to playing the scales. So the first scale will be an A major scale, and this is second finger on the 6th string. So that's where the root is. So we need to put our finger on A if we want it to be an A major scale, and then we play the pattern. Time. So just keep your fingers really aligned over top of the frets. Keep your thumb somewhere behind your second finger. This is an easy one because it doesn't have any shifts in it, right? So it just stays in one position. Just keep your fingers really close to where they're supposed to play. If they're not close, they might play a wrong fret or something, so just keep them hovering over their respective frets, and then just go straight through it. In the right hand, use all your different finger combinations, IM, MA, rest stroke, free stroke, 3 finger scales, whatever it is that you're currently working on. So D major scale, this is second finger on the 5th string, and this has a shift in the middle of it. One more time. When you do the shift in this one, your hand should look like this when it's down here, and then your arm is just going to move your whole hand up. Make sure your thumb doesn't lag behind. You don't want that. Keep your thumb behind your second finger, or where it usually is, and move the whole hand up. So there it is, and there it is. So just make sure that thumb doesn't lag behind. That's a very common problem for students. I would practice right up to the first note in the next position there, and double check that your thumb is in the right place. Of course, with a 2 octave major scale, practice the individual octaves on their own. So the first octave, the second octave, and then you're just combining them. You can watch my previous video on 1 octave major scale patterns. So just a little bit of practice doing that shift and making sure everything is in order. The next scale is 4th finger on the 6th string. This is going to be a C major scale pattern, so we're going to start on the note C. If we started somewhere else, it would be called something different, right? But if If we start on C, it'll be a C major scale. This one has a squeeze shift in it. So let me play it first. Again. So a squeeze shift allows your hand to go into a new position without like a harsh shift or a stretch. So we squeeze the fourth finger in. That way the first finger can extend outward. Then we squeeze the first finger in so that we're back in position. Squeeze in so we can extend. Squeeze in so we can extend. Those squeeze shifts are really important, and you can get lots of practice with them in other books, but it's not usually talked about that much, so I just wanted to make sure it was. I would still move your thumb with your hand when you enter into the new position. Okay, G major 3 octaves. So of course, once you're dealing with 3 octaves, it's much more difficult. We're going to end up going much higher on the guitar, and there's just more shifts involved, right? If you're having trouble with the highest part of the scale, just practice that. Start from your upper G. Keep your first finger down when you shift up. So your first finger will stay down. Should be pretty secure. On the way down, you could keep your first finger down as well. You don't have to though. It's a little bit of a tough shift. So you might want to practice just getting up to that fourth finger, just to make sure that everything is organized and feels okay. Again, as soon as you're out of the upper position, make sure your thumb is behind your second finger once again. And then just proceed downward in the same way that you went up. Okay, minor scales, movable minor scales. So with minor scales, there's 2 different scales we have to cover. There's harmonic minor and melodic minor. Harmonic minor scales raise the 7th degree, so you'll see a little sharp or a natural sign in flat keys. And then in melodic minor, on the way up, on the ascending part of the scale, we have a raised 6th and 7th degree and a lowered, and then they get returned to normal on the way back down, or to the same notes as the key signature. So let's go through these. So again, these are movable. So if we start on an A, it's an A minor scale. If we started on a B, it would be a B minor scale. So A harmonic minor, root on the 6th string, first finger. So we have a 3rd finger guide on that one. A melodic minor, a little bit tougher of a scale. One more time. You might find that shift a little bit difficult, but if you keep your fingers nicely aligned, a little bit of squeak there actually. It's only 2 frets, So don't think of it as a huge distance. Even though we're doing lots of position changing, it's only 2 frets. So just keep your finger very close to the string and get down those 2 frets. There's all sorts of fingerings for these scales. I chose some of these fingerings because they involve shifts that I think are very secure or very straightforward. And sometimes it's just good practice to practice these. There's other fingerings that you could do that would worm around with squeeze shifts, but they're sometimes a little convoluted. So sometimes it's just good to do a nice direct shift and just practice smoothing it out. So a D harmonic minor. This is 5th string, 1st finger. Again, I'll go slow. 2nd finger guide. D melodic minor. One more time. Kind of a tough shift down. Keep in mind that we're actually just going to be going to that fret right there with our 4th finger. So don't think of it as a huge shift. Also, if you want, you can keep your 1st finger down. Even your 2nd finger. You don't have to though. You could lift them off and just do the shift cleanly. But just remember, you're just going to that fret right there. As long as your finger is curved and you're on your fingertip, you just have to practice it very slowly until it's going really well. 2 more scales. So an A harmonic minor, starting on the 6th string with your 1st finger. So this is a 3-octave scale. Go a little slower. And then you return in the same way. Pretty secure scale. I really like that scale fingering because it uses guides the whole time, guide fingers, and it's just like, it's a little bit easier. The guide here, you could go like this, 1, 2, if you wanted. If you wanted to be a little bit more secure and have that extra guide finger there. But otherwise, just keep it in position and do a clean position shift. And the last scale is A melodic minor, starting on the 6th string. Again, there's lots of fingerings for these scales, and you could use lots of squeeze shifts and all sorts of things, but I like to keep my scales kind of like more directly in one position to the next and then just practice the shifts, just because it's really good for technique, especially at the earlier levels, like intermediate levels for students. Just keeping everything in position and like having an organized hand is sometimes just better for their hand positions than learning a scale that worms around and does anything funny, right? One more time. So those are some of my favorite major and minor movable scales. That's not all of the movable scales that are possible. Those are just some of my favorites. They're ones that I use every day when I warm up with my scales. So feel free to practice those. Others worthy scales of practicing are all the modes, of course, and of course the natural minor scale. And I didn't go over the natural minor scale today, but it's part of the melodic minor scale. The descending portion of the melodic minor scale is a natural minor scale. So in a way, you've covered it if you've done your melodic minor scales. Make sure you've watched the video on 1-octave scales and movable scales. That way you'll recognize all the octaves within these. And also the video on how to practice scales because it offers lots of suggestions and tips. So I've put links to that under the video.